So I've been asked to show how to create this particular heart shape using dimensions. The request has been that it needs to be built to these exact dimensions. So this is an example of what I was given. So I'll show you how I would tackle this and at the same time keep the curved part of a heart in a state where I can come back at any time and adjust the iterations or the steps in that curve. So if I wanted a lower resolution curve or a higher resolution curve, I can come back at any time and make that adjustments or those adjustments. Before we get started, if you're using Blender 2.79, just come over to your Scene tab and ensure your length is set to metric, and you can leave your unit scale set to 1. And with your display, if it's not visible, click on the display arrow and make sure your scale is set to 0.010 if you want to follow along and have your version of Blender behave the same way mine does. And if you're using Blender 2.8, same deal, come over to the Scene tab and come down, make sure your system is set to metric and set your unit scale to 0.01 here and length to millimeters. You'll also need to come up to this setting up here and under grid, make sure your scale is set to 0.010. What that means is that if I press GX1 as enter, you'll see that that vertex is just shifted across 1 millimeter. And each of these squares that you see on the screen here is 1 millimeter. What will happen is if you want to shift this vertex over 1 millimeter, you'll have to press GX.001 on your numeric keyboard, enter, to move it 1 millimeter. Again, each square you see here is 1 millimeter. So how I would tackle this is I would create a cube and I'd make that cube 12 millimeters plus 24, so 36. I'll make it 36 millimeters on the x-axis, and I'll make it 24 millimeters on the y-axis, and I'll make it 10 millimeters deep, just so it's got a dimension for the depth. And what I would then do is to actually first I'll apply my scale. Actually, let me just turn on my screencast key so you can see what I'm doing. So then I would apply my scale and switch to edit mode, select these two edges here and apply a bevel modifier, and I'm going to turn off clamp overlap and we'll just turn it down for now, and I'll set my segments to 8 to start with. I'm going to set my limit method to weight, so I'm going to set my mean bevel weight on these edges, and I'll make the width 0.1 here for now, so it should be 10 centimeters. So let's make that 5 millimeters. And I'll increase the edges data mean bevel weight to 1. And I'll make this, I know this is 12 millimeter radius curve that we're looking for here. So I'll make this setting here 12 millimeters. And that should give me a 12 millimeter radius arc on this section of the heart. So it'll be 12 millimeters down and then 24 millimeters on the straight edge. And if I zoom in, I can see that I count off my squares on the bottom left hand corner on the grid, the background grid, it'll count out to 12. Now what I might also do is put a cut across this object while I'm here, just a loop cut, and I'll switch my my snapping tool to increment. I'll come down here, I'm going to move it on the x-axis to this point here, which will be 12 12 millimeters in from the edge. So now that I've done that, I can delete this edge, which has given me my half a heart shape, and I'm going to switch to vertex mode, select this vertice, or I'll select this vertice, and I'll snap my cursor to that selection, and I'll switch to the pivot point being around the 3D cursor. And now if I rotate this with the snapping tool set to increment, from the top view I can rotate it and it will snap to be completely vertical. At this point I might delete the face, this face here, because I'm going to mirror this and I don't want any internal geometry inside this geometry, because that'll create a non-manifold mesh. And let's just hit Alt-G. Actually, before I do that, I'll select this vertice down here, switch to vertex mode, and I'll just make sure that my cursor is snapped to that vertice. Come back to object mode, and I'm going Control-Alt-Shift-C, and I'm going to set my origin to the 3D cursor. So now the origin of this object is set where that 3D cursor was. So now if I hit Alt-G, it'll snap that to 0. I'll put a mirror modifier on this object, and I need to apply you can see here my rotation's off, so I need to apply my rotation, which will fix that scaling there. And I'll leave it set to merge so that it's going to merge the vertices together. So now we have a heart shape that we can create an STL file from, which I can go back at any time. I'll move the mirror modifier up to the top. So it's going to do the mirror modifier first, and then the bevel. And so anytime I can increase the segments, and you can see here that I can make the curve smoother, rounder, or I can make it coarser with less segments. This is just a nice option for keeping this as a live mesh, as if you like to be able to adjust it at any time. So from here I would then export that as an STL, and selection only. I'm going to set my scale to 1000 because I'm going to Cura. I know that's what it requires. I'm going to tick my scene units on, and I'm going to tell it to apply all modifiers on export. So let's export that now. We'll just call it heart shape. And export. I'll load Cura. I'm using Cura 4.4, I think it is, but 4.4.1, but this will work with any version of Cura after version 3. So I'll import that. I'll open the file to test, and let's have a look and see what happens when we slice it. Slicing's done, and we'll check it, and that's worked perfectly. So that's how you would create a heart shape using or working to dimensions. Well, that's the way I would do it anyway. And you can see here I've got a nice curve, nice and smooth, because I've included enough segment data when I set my bevel. All right, I hope that's been useful. Thanks for your support, and bye for now.